There we go. Welcome everyone to our MOQ virtual interim. This is the last one before our hybrid interim in the Denver area at the end of February, and the last one before Ian publishes a new version of the MOQT draft. If you haven't already requested agenda time for that meeting in Denver, you're already late, but we're not going to do anything within the next 60 minutes, so feel free to send an email to MOQ chairs if you have some sort of agenda request. Oops. All right, this is the note. Well, as always, it talks about the intellectual property and implications you being here, and the code of conduct. Just be nice to each other. Be aware that anything you announce here that contains intellectual property, that intellectual property claim should be disclosed, etc. If you're curious or are unfamiliar with this, please take a look at all those links there in the slide. As always, we're using Zulip for technical chat. It is persistent and archived, so if you have technical comments on what is being discussed or on something else in MOQ, there's you can use the Zulip link. That is pinned to the Google Meet chat and also linked from the meeting's data tracker page. If you haven't already, please go to the notes, which are also linked to the Google Meet chat and also linked on the data tracker page, and put your name and affiliation in the blue sheets. And as always, we're going to use Google Meet for audio, video, and slides, as you've already figured out. Also, when we are queuing to make comments and ask questions, use the show of hands tool in Google Meet, and that has a nice habit of ordering things in the order they arose, so we can keep a nice, neat queue there. So thank you for complying. Please do not use the Google Meet chat for technical stuff. MOQ related stuff. For meeting technical stuff, like what's the link to the, this and that, that's fine. Okay, this is the agenda today. We're in the chair introduction. The chairs and editor, MOQT editor, hooked up a plan to reorganize the draft in response to an issue that's been filed, I think by Colin like 6 months ago or a year ago. So I sent out an email to the list about a week ago on sort of a plan moving forward. Colin wanted more information, so Ian's going to provide that information, and then there's maybe a brief discussion on timing that we can have. Then the bulk of the meeting is going to be Will bringing back his extensible object header. One of the consequences of this draft reorg is we really like to land as many PRs as we can, particularly far-reaching ones, because they will bit rot pretty badly when we start recutting and pasting sections around. And then if we need it, we'll take some time to conclude. Would anyone like to bash the agenda? Is Ian actually here? I can't see in the screen. Ian is not here. Well, this gives us a moment to find a scribe. As always, you need someone to take notes. Please do not take verbatim notes. That is actively bad. Just record the key points, the decisions that were made, so that people can read a quick summary of what happened in today's meeting. If they want a transcript, they can watch the YouTube recording.
I can scribe.
Mike, thank you very much. All right, well, Ian isn't here, so why don't, Will, would you mind if we kind of launched into this and then maybe took a little interlude to talk about rearranging stuff?
Yep, no problem.
All
so
right,
you want me to share from this side?
Let me, got too many tabs open, 1 minute. There you go, it's all yours.
Okay, let me know if you're seeing these slides. I uploaded slides to the data tracker. By mistake, I uploaded the slides when we had previously presented this. So Martin, you should find a second approval in your inbox, which is for the revised slides, or Alan, if you guys have access to it. So this is our second discussion on adding headers. I sent out an email to the list last week in preparation for this call, summarizing the discussion we had in the prior session. and listing any changes to the PR that came from that discussion. So today I listed a bunch of issues that we need to resolve. So these slides will represent those issues. You don't need to read the email. Just to get everyone on the same page, though, I'm going to remind you what the headers are very, very briefly. They're object extension headers. The idea is that we can evolve the transport protocol or make it more flexible without having to revise the core RFC in the future. The headers are referenced in an external IANA managed table, and we have a use case submitted by a 5G group or 3GPP. Just as another reminder, they have a deadline. They have a solution based on this PR, and they've made an explicit request that we can get this into our February 10th revision of our draft, because they have a deadline as well for getting it into theirs. So that request has been made. After the last meeting, we used to say extension headers must be forwarded and must not be modified by relays. We had a discussion and we relaxed this to should be forwarded and should not. The point was the easiest argument against the prior one was that there are relays at the edge who want to strip network sensitive information, such as tracing headers, for example, from going out to end users, and that therefore at their discretion, they should be able to not forward certain headers as long as they understand which ones they are. And compliant relays will obviously do the right thing most of the time, and we can't stop malicious relays from being malicious by writing it into the spec. They're intended to carry information that's acted on by the relays, not by the end consumer. So if there's data that is payload related, it should be in the payload. A header is not a place to carry metadata about the payload. And these are optional headers. Therefore, we do need to signal in each object that we're not carrying headers. The serialization in the
Colin has a question.
Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Well, so two of those things on the should, I want to make sure we have time to talk about the should not thing, and I want to talk about the they shouldn't relate to the payload data, because like both of those seem very important topics for us. So I don't know if we have. I mean, I put comments in on the PR on that or whatever, but I mean, anyway, I would just want some point in our discussion today to talk about those two, if that's okay.
Absolutely.
So I don't know if you have slides on them or where the right spot is, but
on should not, no, because that was somewhat of a resolution from the last one, so I didn't want to repeat it. Chair's discretion. Want to stop here and discuss should not.
My recommendation is to go through all of your slides and issues, just so we get through all the presentation material, and then we can keep a list of things we want to talk about, and we can put should not, since that was something we talked about before, but like it does, like both like my individual email to the list and Colin's concerned, like seems like we need to spend some time talking on that probably first before we go into some of the other questions. Does that sound
sure? I've added it here so we don't lose it. These are the questions we're going to
and then the other one Colin had, I think, was like basically the
scope of the data for
does it pertain, like, is it, I don't know, maybe the way I tried to phrase it in my email was like, is it required for the end consumer, like, or is it like, is it something you need to understand the payload, or is it?
I don't think that was Colin's comment. He was talking about this decoupling between, like, it should not be metadata for the payload. Is that correct?
Yeah, exactly. Right. Like, for example, I mean, I obviously want to, we'll get to that discussion there, but I want to use it to provide information about stuff that's in the payload, not stuff that has only to do with the relays. Right. Yeah.
So Ian is now.
Sounds good to me.
Are we like, is this as good a time as any to break the flow, or do we want to do some more slides?
I would. Why don't we just end a little bit early? Why don't we just cut this discussion at
all right,
a quarter to the hour, and then
cool. Okay.
Okay. Okay, so let's go quickly. The serialization in the object stream, you say how many you have, and then you list a sequence of them. And the header itself, each header has a type, and depending on the type, you have two different serializations, either a single varent or a varent holding a value, or a type length value couple. And here's an example. I updated one of the additions since last time. I updated the example. So here we have an object we're signaling that we have two extensions. The first one has a single varint value. The second one, because of the higher type, has a length and then a value holding its trace information in this case. The requested extension parameter, this is a setup key that was introduced. I think that is incorrect. It is actually 03. The client sends a list of extensions that it would like the server to indicate if it understands them. At least that was the intent. Those that the server understands or supports, it then echoes back. And if it does not support any of them, we reserve the parameter length value of 0 for that, so that it can indicate that it doesn't support any of the ones that were requested. The client, at its discretion, can then break the connection if that's critical, if it perceives that is critical to its behavior, or else it continue just knowing that those extensions are not understood. We have some debate about this. And then just listing this proposed IANA table where we reserve some of the number space, basically a 1-byte varint for standards where we care about the size, which would be these two, 2 bytes where space is less of concern, and then 3 bytes enough for non-standardization usage. So the core of our discussion today are these questions. And I don't think we should read through all of them, but maybe we can just focus on them from the beginning, or else we can go back and take Alan's and start with these first. Otherwise, I was going to start with the whole need to negotiate extension headers in the first place.
Oh, I just had a minor comment on the previous slide. Like, you've got 0x20 here, but you had decimal 20 there.
I think you made that comment last time. Yeah, sorry. It's
I think about 32 there.
Yeah.
Minor comment. And in terms of how we tackle things, why don't we tackle the forwarding considerations first? That seems like, unless somebody else wants to tackle something else first.
Okay.
Your point, Alan, do you want to quickly summarize your points before we start? Because you made
You mean what I said on the list, or?
Yes.
Oh, I can. So this was as an individual, and one thing that I think has really helped, that I think is a really important property of MOQT, is that objects are immutable. For a given track, group, and object, you always get the same thing. And once we put headers in there, and the possibility that, like, say if, like Cullen was describing a tracing use case where every relay adds a different header, then it's possible all of a sudden that I get 2 copies of an object which have the same payload but different headers, right? Because it came to this relay via 2 different paths. And like, I'm very concerned that this can of worms is going to like break a property and like lead us down to the HTTP world with like very headers. And I'm like, no, please no. So I guess my proposal there was to, I don't even know if it makes sense or how other people think about this. First of all, is this a property that we're concerned about? How do we want to manage it? But essentially, I thought it made sense to distinguish extensions that need to be treated like the payload, in that the relay cannot touch them. It's like the payload. If you touch it, you die. Like, this is what the original publisher wants. It's got to be carried in its exact form all the way to the end consumer, because it's required by the end consumer to consume it. And then we could make the same guarantees around that part. Like, instead of saying for track object group, you get this payload, it's track object group, you get this payload, and this set of, like, I call them required, but you can give another name. This set of headers are guaranteed to be the same. Then there's another set of extensions which have no bearing, and they can be whatever. So I don't know if that is useful or what the group thinks about that. So I'll let people are queuing up. Good.
So I think I was first in queue. Yeah, I had written a response online to you, Alan, which I'll just restate now, which is, I think putting a bit in the relay to say you must not modify an extension is unnecessary and also unenforceable. Relays are going to do what they like anyway, right? So relays that don't understand an extension are not going to waste resources arbitrarily modifying it. And relays that do understand it will know if they should modify it and also how they should modify it, like a tracing header, right? So I think the current language of should not and should is workable in that regard. Compliant relays will know what they need to do and will do it. And it gives normative flexibility to the relays that they can modify some extensions and not others. If we go down the road of trying to create an enum of all the different combinations of potential extensions you're allowed to modify or not, I think we walk down a strange path. So that was my point. And I did support your other point that what we should put in is a bit signal saying that the end user should never see this extension. And I think that is a very useful one, because in the future, a relay that hasn't been updated and knows nothing about these new extensions, it could still see that bit flag and know that it should strip them out if they're private for the network. So I think that protects the network and it's future facing.
I just want to respond quickly based on the comment I just dropped in the chat right before we started this conversation, which is like, I think here, what you're trying to say with the should is that some extensions are going to be must and some are not. And maybe the thing to say is that like, it's a must. If you don't understand it, you have to forward it. Like, unless we add this like caveat where like somebody signals that like, it's not supposed to go somewhere, but like, if you don't understand, you forward. If you do understand it, then the definition of the extension will tell you what you can and can't do with it. So maybe should is not the right way to express that in the doc, but I think, I don't know, maybe I'll let other people talk.
I think it's Mo next.
Yeah, so I think before we talk about rules, it may be useful to agree on what some of the purposes of things are. Like immutability, like Alan mentioned, we originally came up with that because of the caching aspect. You know, if we were only delivering stuff live, I think we'd care so much about immutability, but because things can be cached and stored and forward and sent later, then you have, you know, different bits coming for the same key. It doesn't make any sense. So I guess the real question for this is, do we expect cached delivery of objects to ever have a different set of extensions than the original live delivery? And the first thing that I could think of is that some of the extensions may relate to delivery itself. So it may be odd to expect that the cached version of the object looks bitwise identical to the live version if some of the extensions are actually about the delivery itself.
Can I answer that? Or I think Mo, I think it's inevitable if the relay is caching the object, it can store the headers that have these extensions that have to do with live, and then if they're delivered later to the client will know that it's not playing them back live, so there wouldn't be a problem. I think the state of playback is known to the client, and therefore the interpretation of the extensions under that state change would also be known to the client.
So is your position whether you think it makes sense to just only make sure that the cache key data is always delivered 100% immutably and reliably, and then everything beyond the cache key in the headers is sort of, you know, the client doesn't need to validate or be guaranteed that matches from a live delivery?
We had discussion on this in the list as well about caching. I think the headers, these extensions need to be cached with the object. And in terms of, if I get two objects coming with different headers, we follow the same rules for what do we do with two object payloads. And right now, the first one written survives, right? And we can go LIFO, FIFO, it really doesn't matter. But whatever that logic is should include the extensions that arrived with the payload in that object, I think. And that it simplifies a little bit the caching decision that the relay has to make.
And the one final point was that Alan mentioned he had some, you know, breakdown of what the different categories of extension types would be, and there was one that he didn't see a point of, but I thought an example of it would be a high runner. If a relay wants to stamp the ingress network that the packet came in from, so the leaf relay is seeing the original publisher and it wants to identify the original network of that publisher. That seems like a common thing that, you know, for data sovereignty or for, you know, general authorization flows, you want to know authoritatively from a relay node where this publication came from, that seems like something that would be added by the first hop relay. And so I think that's an example of something where it's required by the relay network. It doesn't need to be required by the end subscriber, but it's required by the relay network, and it didn't come from the original publisher. It came from the first hop relay.
That's
Can I just-
perfectly fine. Not all extensions have to come from the first publisher. Any node can write an extension.
Okay,
Right.
They
They can both write a new one or overwrite and extend an existing one.
the category I was trying to highlight are extensions that are required by the end consumer to even consume the payload. So, and I think your example mode, that's probably not accurate, but I'm thinking more about the way, for example, the headers you defined in LOC, where those absolutely are going to be required in order to consume that content. And so I guess I didn't see a case where the relay network is adding or modifying those kinds of bits, but maybe there still is, but I guess I was trying to draw that.
So let me jump in here. I think I like sort of where Alan was going with the thoughts on this, but let me give a straw man proposal I think might actually work, which is we say that who's allowed to modify the given data in a header is defined in the extension. And when you define the header, you say in the text who's allowed to modify it. So some of the things obviously would be end-to-end and the relay can't change them. Some things would obviously be meant for like the trace ID and stuff, like for the relay to change. And we also say that relays must not change any extensions they don't understand. So they can't just arbitrarily delete stuff they don't know, right? And I think that sounds like it would meet an awful lot of the use cases we've hit. It doesn't have us, we're not encoding it on the wire, whether it's allowed or not. We're just encoding it in the RFCs. What do people think? Like, Alan, would that sort of hit what you were thinking?
I think it's as long as there's a default, which is, it sounds like you must, like if you don't get it, you must forward it, then I think it's fine. Because there will be new extensions that nobody knows, right?
Of course.
As long as
that's right.
As long as there's a sensible behavior there and we think we can live with that default behavior, then I think that is probably fine.
So, must not modify, must not, and must forward unknown things, but everything else, you do what it says. And we, explicitly, assume that there will be headers that were created by a relay for other relays or created by a relay for an endpoint or, all the variants that you can have here. And really my only thing on this type of stuff of whatever we do, I don't want to use should here because some people interpret that to it just creates interoperability problems. We should say may or must not, because otherwise I know we will be in arguments with implementers 6 months down the road that says should not, you can't do that. And we're like, no, in special cases you can if you know what you're doing. That's why it should. It's just a disaster. Like this is a place we should be, must, may, we should be must or must not, not in the middle. So yeah.
Helen, I updated the slide. Does that language meet what you were saying, the first bullet point one?
Must not modify, must forward of unknown. And then may modify and may not forward if specified in the definition of the extension.
Okay.
Okay, if I'm up next.
I'm good with that unless there's additional discussion.
So I'm a little confused about this parameter, the setup parameter. So like if you have a bunch of subscribers hanging off a relay and they request different setup parameters or different extensions, I guess. And the relay, not only has to aggregate those, but probably, many use cases already has a pre-existing session with its upstream source, right? That is carrying all these subscribes and subscribe announces and everything else. Like, would relays just, as a matter of course, just like request all the extensions that they know about? And how would they ever see an extension they didn't know about because they wouldn't have requested it in the first place in the setup message?
I mean, Martin, can I just say your question is slightly different? I think your question is does when you send back in an answer, I support this. Do you mean that one relay you connected supported it, or do you mean every relay your data is going to flow through supports it? Right? That's like, isn't that the essence of what you're getting at here?
I mean, well, that's like one sub. I mean, I don't understand the entire model, and maybe I need to go back and read the PR, but that is like one of the. I mean, I think there's an issue like aggregating relays. There's an issue of, is this an end-to-end assurance? I'm sorry, aggregating downstream subscribers. Is this is this setup parameter and then signals? Another question. Another one is like, how do I do this preemptively? Because the setup can a setup message from a relay upstream can long predate any downstream subscribers, right? So like we don't have to necessarily do it here, but I'd like to see like a worked narrative on how this system is actually supposed to work with the setup, or is the setup parameter advisory? Am I misunderstanding fundamentally what we're doing?
It only says what it supports. It doesn't change the state of anything. It just says what that relay. It doesn't enable the feature. It merely says you understand that feature. So yeah,
Okay.
It's definitely advisory at best.
All right, super. So so the relay should just send, as a matter of course, it should just send like a list of everything it supports in the setup parameter. Okay. I mean, that still raises the question of how the heck would I ever see something I'd never support. But all right, thank you.
Ian?
I was going to say, I thanks for working through the proposal of the must not and must. That sounds great. I'm fine with that. I do think it'd be easier just to drop extension, the negotiation aspect at this point, because I can imagine doing some things with it, and I'm not really sure what we actually want to do with it. And I haven't thought of a use case that like without negotiation, somehow that use case wouldn't work correctly. Like it seems like, at least of all the ones I can think of, like if you just remove negotiation for now, like you can still do what you need to do at the moment. And so unless we really, really think we need it now, we can punt it until later and decide to re-edit back later.
That would be my proposal, and I stated in bullet point 2 there. We don't have a clear use case where we can use it right now. And again, a relay that understands that you're signaling that you understand what to do with this, then you're going to do whatever is specified that you should do. So the negotiation component becomes arbitrary and about as close to meaningless as we can get right now. Gwendol, I think.
Yeah, I agree on this negotiation. I don't understand it, but I was mostly on the first bullet. I don't know what known and unknown means, and I don't know how we specify in the definition of the extension that something can be done. So in the definition of the extension, maybe it's related to the big table we have with the values. But so I don't know. How do we define that we know or unknow something? Is it like a, I mean, I don't have any clue on this.
I think the word should be supported, not unknown. It's really supported.
And the same question, how do we know when something's supported? Like,
Maybe,
This is the relay. Relay knows whether or not it supports something, right?
And it's like, how do you know if RFC 123 is supported or not? It's like sort of yes, no.
so
Yeah,
the relay in that case state that he may modify an extension, and some other extension he say I don't. So it's a self declaration of
Extension X. Extension X is an RFCY. If the relay supports RFCY, it may modify it if RFCY says that it may modify it.
And if the RFC says it's not allowed to do it, then it would be a bug in that relay if it went and modified it, right? So it leaves it up to when we define the spec, we say whether it's allowed to be modified in the relay or not. And you know, I mean, we all understand relays will do what relays do, but
but to that point, Colin, could we not then go with the should of in our core spec, right? And allow this external spec to add the normative must not or may overriding ours, right? We set a baseline, which is in some cases you can, some cases you can't. And then the other spec would provide the normative behavior.
Well, I mean, maybe this is almost what we're saying. So shoulds I just hate in this case because some people will interpret shoulds one way and some people will interpret them other ways, and that creates interop issues. So, but what we're basically saying here is you must not, unless the spec and thus the definition of the thing says you should, or you can, or whatever, right? I used should in the wrong word there, right? So, and look, if people want to encode this into the registry somehow, like there's a bit that tells you which one of these two cases it is. I don't really care, but I don't actually see much value in that bit. It'll all turn into the same thing in the end. And really, this is only, giving strong guidance to people who are implementing relays about whether they're allowed to modify a given header or not, and whether they get that. If they're going to modify the header, they have to understand what the header means and what it means. So they definitely implement it at the point they're going to modify it. And if the spec says, if the bit says they shouldn't modify it, they may modify it, they may not, but it'll be exactly the same as if the standard says they should or shouldn't modify it. It won't actually change behavior in the real world in any real way to have the bit there versus just have the bit implicitly in the spec and not encoded on the wire. But I live with either way. It doesn't matter to me. It's not it's a bit.
Okay, Mo, did you have a separate comment from Colin?
I just want to, I hope we can close one thing at a time. I thought I heard rough consensus that we're okay with stripping out the negotiation mechanism. We didn't see clear value or clear benefit in it right now. Are we okay to go ahead and make that decision to simplify things?
I would like to. Are there any objections if we strip out for now the negotiation mechanism? We can add it back once we have implementation experience in the future, but then we'll have a real case that we can talk through for why we need it.
I have a question about this. The negotiation, is it like always issued by the subscriber or can be issued by the publisher?
It's a part of the setup, so it's done by the client when it's establishing a connection. It's independent of subscriptions.
Okay.
I just wanted to go back and I sort of +1 to Colin here. I don't think we should use a should. I think must forward if you're not conforming with the definition of the extension for whatever the extension is. And if you do conform, then that extension tells you what you can and can't do. Some version of that, let the editor massage it. I think that's fine. I think we should dropping negotiation seems totally fine. I think again, speaking as an individual, seems totally fine. As an advisory, if you just want to broadcast, by the way, I actually conform to the specification for the following extensions is maybe useful information, may not be, but we don't have to have it now.
Yeah.
But it's not like you can't send it unless I send this. That's not what this is. So, and it's confusing people.
Okay. So I'm going to document this as no objections for now, but, and then I'll remove it. Okay. Can we move to bullet point 3 as the discussion subject? This was something raised by maybe it was Ian. Do we need asymmetry during the negotiation? I think this is a moot point now. If we don't have negotiation, we don't have to spend.
OB.
Not applicable. Okay. Discussion point 4. So if we go to the header types, and this was something Colin had proposed initially. So header types 0 to 32 are followed by a single variant. Is this sufficiently large space for extensions, right? It's a finite space. If we shift it to something where, say, every even type had a variant, then we would have a whole lot more opportunities to use variants. This is somewhat of a bike shed color question, but I also think it's relevant because once we commit to it and people start registering, we can't invent a scheme where the type of your number now invokes that serialization. Alan.
Yeah. So, I just want to make sure we understand what we're committing to if we land this PR, right? This document is not working group last call. It is not IETF last call. Anybody so the decision we make now, we still can change later if new information emerges that 30, in my opinion, like, I don't know, 32 seems fine. And like, let's move forward. Let's not block on this and let anybody know, like these 3GPP guys, that like, hey, by the way, every single bit in this protocol is still subject to change. So be aware. Like,
I got a really quick suggestion on this. Make the table in this PR be like what you have, 0 to 31, okay? But the next one, instead of doing it 32 to 127, make it 64 and just mark
63.
or whatever, and just mark 31 to 63 as reserved for now, and we can later define how we want to use those bits, right? I just, you know, actually, I regret even saying that. I don't care what we do here. This should all change. But you know what I mean? You could put some reserve space in this table to hedge your bets for later.
I think the key for this number allocation is figuring out, we don't want it to be a gold rush. Everybody's running to register crap extensions to reserve their spot. We want to make a you know, concerted effort among the group for protocol efficiency to figure out what are the things that are critical for a large swath of the users. And it's critical to, this is going to be a high runner extension that's going to be in almost every single packet. And it's going to be in most use cases. And it's only a single number. And we don't want to burn, you know, extra bytes to encode that extension. So the group should kind of figure out what that top 32 or 64 or whatever space is.
Okay. But we are prohibiting these general first come, first served. There's no variant options. And that seems a bit unfair, right? There could be plenty of use cases where all I want to do is send a number.
Well, they can, but they just have to encode the length along with the number, which is but this is what's saving you encoding an extra byte of length.
Great point. Well, why don't you put, but in the second range, in the 16-bit range, why don't you put some that are like a variant value as well there too, or something like that? I mean, this seems like we could bike shed this to death, but I mean, like.
Yeah, we just have to make a decision quickly. That's all. So this is the time for bike shedding.
Okay, I propose putting a single variant value range in the 16-bit range as well.
16 and above. Okay, so splitting this.
Oh, sorry. No, I meant in the stuff that in the 128 to. I mean, yeah, sure, put it there too, but I barely care about that. It's the one above it, the 128 to 16,000 range. That seems like.
No,
Okay,
no,
so-
the 64 to 127 would be standards with variant.
Okay, I'm not going to do it in front of you. Each of these can be split into two ranges, right? One of which includes variant, the other of which is type length value.
I mentioned this on the PR, but couldn't we just do even odd and then we don't have to do anything complicated? It seems easier. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong.
Sure.
Yes. Anyone object to even odd? Even as variant, odd has TLV, and then we just define the range.
Yeah. Then Will has to write less text about like where these.
I don't have to modify our table.
Yeah. I don't know.
I'm just making this proposal. Okay. I like that.
But I think expert review should still be required so that there's not a gold rush to, you know, register the first 32 evens.
I mean, there's standards required, aren't they?
They are. We haven't written any of the IANA tables yet, but it probably will be standard. You know, I would think RFC required or something like that.
Yeah, we probably can crib the text from the QUIC docs or HB3 docs if we want, because I think there's like 3 ranges there. So
Okay, can I move on then to discussion point 5? I think this is a moot point as well. Away from the mutability, because we've had the decision we've modified option 1. Alan, this was your point.
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing one thing you mentioned was like, oh, the current spec is like, if you get a second copy of the object with different payload, its last one wins. And like, we probably haven't written this down, but I don't think I think if you ever get in the current spec, if you ever get another object with a different payload, you should immediately blow up, because that should never happen in mock. So like, that's just without talking about extensions. And then the question is like, if that's true, what do we do now that there are extensions that relays can add, modify, and there's now no guarantees about what's there? Like, that means that we need to give some normative rule to the relay. If they got a new copy of an object and it's got the same payload but different extension headers, than I previously had, what do I do normatively? Do I like override it or I keep the first one?
I think what we said previously is you treat the object override as we do with our existing override. So if you get another copy of the object, whether or not its payload is the same, you take that payload, you take those extensions, and you either don't override or do override, depending what our core object override logic is.
I mean, my relay will like file a formal protest if somebody sends me a second object with a different content, because that's like cat poison. So no, but like, which means the same rules can't apply for extensions because the extensions can be different.
Right. I regard what you cache is a tuple basically of the extensions and the payload. In other words, if someone sends you the same payload with different extensions, you would ignore it.
Then how do you, okay, like,
You just ignore it. It's the second time you're
okay,
trying
so I
to.
think what you're saying first one wins. Like,
Yeah,
the first guy's extensions win. Maybe that's fine. I just think we
I
need to say
I don't care which one. We should just, I think in our specs, we should say which one wins. Helen for Q.
Oh, okay. I mean, I was going to say, we definitely have cases in the error make before the error cases where you got disconnected and reconnected, where you will end up with the same object twice. And I can imagine them having different headers. But I agree with Alan, like formal complaint to the UN if they have different data. But I think in that case, I think actually what we should say in the spec is that you will be delivered the headers that came with one of them. You won't get some weird mix of headers. It might be the first, it might be the last. That's undefined. It's up to the relay networks. We don't care. You'll get a set of headers that was valid for some object, for one of the times that object was sent, and we don't care if it's first or last. Like all bets are off.
Yeah, I disagree strongly with that, Colin. I think the extension and the object are tethered, right? They may have meaning. You don't know what's inside that payload, but it may relate to something that was in the headers. For example, Mo's example of where it came from, right? One could be corrupt, one would not. You don't want to mix and match extensions separately from payloads.
Sorry, 100% agree. Okay, but since I think the payload can't possibly be different on that, but I mean, I agree. You have to get the headers from a payload that you were being delivered, right? Or from one, yeah, they should be kept together. They shouldn't be mixed and matched. We're saying the same thing. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So I'm just saying, I don't really care if I mean, you said we don't care if it's last in or if it's the last one or the first one. I don't think we should specify which one it is, because I think it's actually hard for some of the relay consistency mechanisms. I think we should just say you'll get one. That's it.
So
Right.
we're basically saying don't merge them, or don't try to like.
Yeah,
smush
for
them
sure.
together.
Don't merge.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So
Don't. Yeah.
that's actually important advice. That seems sensible, but that's probably important.
Right.
So, Will, are we going to be able to wrap this up in the next 5 minutes or so? Or?
Yeah, I'm trying really hard here. Okay,
Okay.
so I'm going to have this as the answer. So the answer to this is, do we add a bit? No bit, but add text. I'll fix the English later. So we're not going to add a bit, but we'll add text to not merge. Okay.
I mean, and also say that like if you have more than one copy, it's not defined which one you're going to get one, but we're not going to tell you which one. Relay choice.
Undefined
I
behavior.
think we should debate that as well. I think that's really bad for consistent behavior. I got two CDNs, one of which gets FIFO, the other LIFO. I give them two objects, and depending which CDN you go to, get a different object.
Okay.
I think we want consistent behavior.
Maybe in the interest of time in your PR, you can just write it one way and put a note that says we still need to debate this, because I don't think we're going to make your deadline if we have to debate that now.
Okay, add a choice. Add something for now, or LIFO, etc. Don't worry. Point 6, do we want to add a bit to identify what was not delivered to the end user? This case, I think, actually makes it a bit more future-proof. We could always add the bit later, but things like bits involve serialization, and it's more of a change when you have to update your relay. Colin.
SIP did this with a user identifier that must not be delivered due to PII issues in a certain way. And it turned out to be a colossal failure from beginning through to end. No one could ever figure out when they were at the last SIP proxy and when to remove it. So look, I don't care if we do this. I'm fine with it. I would just encourage people to think hard about how you know you're the relay that needs to remove it if we go down this forward. I don't care. I mean, I don't believe this will work, by the way, but I don't care if we put it in the spec, right? Like, I mean, I've seen this disaster play out. I've been hauled in front of EU commissions on it.
Mo?
Yeah, I don't mind if somebody wants to have the functionality of removing something at the leaf relay, but I don't think it should be encoded because it doesn't make any sense. If you understand the extension and you know you're supposed to remove it, then you already know. You don't need to be told by a bit. So if you don't understand the extension and a bit tells you to remove it, I don't think you should be removing extensions you don't even understand. So the bit makes no sense to me at all.
Yeah.
The functionality may make sense, but the bit doesn't make sense.
That's a good point.
Yeah, it's a good point. I'm gonna document it.
I mean, but doesn't that limit you in the future of ever adding, let's say I'm introducing a new extension that none of my leaf relay, but I don't want forwarded to the user, but I don't want any of none of my, or like you got Cisco adds it, but my, generic relay doesn't understand it and you don't want it forwarded. You can only deploy it after every single relay in the world has been taught your extension and not forward it.
But you're asking for a bit that leaf relays that don't understand the extension must strip.
Well,
Yeah.
I mean, they'll understand what the extension, what it says in the wire. Like if you think you're the last one, you better take this out. So it's giving some, relay.
They don't understand the RFC. They do not support the RFC.
It's nothing to do with the RFC though. It's to do with the header protocol, which is part of core mock transport.
Yeah, I agree with Will here. Like, it's not about whether the extension is giving some metadata about itself on the wire. And
Will,
the relay can understand that.
Well, you have 3 minutes. I'm cutting you off mid-sentence.
Okay. So I'd say for now we don't add it and we go add it later. But
Yeah,
I
let's file an issue.
a fair idea. Okay. And then lastly, greasing. I think this makes sense. I was thinking of a simple scheme, like every 13th type is you can put an arbitrary random value and it's reserved as a greased value. Would something simple like that work at this point?
We can do that in a different PR if we want, though. I would say because we have an issue for greasing that applies to almost everything in this protocol, and we haven't bothered to fix it. So
Okay,
I don't know.
good for me. I won't add it. And then we have this core debate about should the header value not be metadata about the payload. And Colin.
Well, I mean, I think one of our core designs here was to have our payload so they could be used in HLS dash as well. So, and we also have we have a bunch of things where we want the relay to be able to change them for various things. And we definitely don't want the relay's not going to be able to change the payloads when we're doing the end encryption because it's going to be signed across, encrypted across that. So I think that we have to have somewhere we can put header values that are not, that relate to the payload that are not part of that. I mean, the audio timestamp being an obvious one that's been brought up over and over again, but and we're already deep in the relays can change all of this stuff. And we allow types that we don't even know what they are off in the higher bit range. I mean, I don't think you could possibly get this if you wanted it, and I don't see any value in this. I mean, we need a place to put some of this information that has to do with the payload without modifying the payload, and this is like exactly the right place to put it. So I don't
the queue.
see the problem.
Everyone, please limit your comments to 30 seconds.
Yeah.
Go.
My
Will.
comment was, I think we need time to debate this. We should add it to the agenda item at Denver because there's points for and against on this one. And I don't think it's material. We can always add some language and modify this, but I don't think it's material to merging this PR right now.
Fair.
Alan,
Yeah, I mean, similar comment, which is that I don't think there's anything we can use. These restrictions probably belong in the streaming format definitions of what goes into the header and what goes into the payload. But I'll note mock.me is a great example where we have audio timestamps. They are in the payload. The payload just has its own set of headers, which are not relay visible. And that can be fine. And it can be more performant for relays to not have to parse these things if they're never going to touch them. But we can talk about it later. It doesn't need to go in this PR.
Mo,
I think this is unenforceable, so I don't think we should specify anything that's clearly has no value in the protocol and is completely unenforceable. For LOC, I do plan to change it to have a payload header like the original version of LOC. Have a payload header for these values, and we can decide later whether or not we merge it back into the object header extension.
Suhas.
Yeah, I just want to repeat what Mo said. This is totally unenforceable. You don't know what the first proposal will make it work, even if you put the entire payload in the header extension. It doesn't matter. So I don't think so. We can enforce it and should not be in the spec.
Okay, thank you, Will.
Thank you. So
Ian,
just
you're up.
action item, I'm going to tidy up the PR and then hopefully I can work with it.
If you're still interested in this, please go to the PR and join that discussion. If you have not signed the blue sheets, please sign the blue sheets. There's a link in the Google Meet chat. And Will, I would invite you to also look at the Zulip. There's some other comments about this proposal. All right, Ian, go.
Actually, I was going to say that Mike English's PR about joining Fetch, I think is I will present over. I think is actually fairly complete. And I don't know if anyone has any objections to how it stands today. It's worth highlighting that it was updated to only apply to latest object, because the other modes of subscribe created a number of edge cases that were solvable but extremely uninteresting to solve and not very compelling in terms of actual use cases. And so that allowed it to be quite a bit shorter, I think, than the original text was, and I think it looks good. Does anyone have any concerns about that text?
I mean, I'd like to review, but I'd like to review, but I can do that in the next couple of days or whatever.
Okay. I mean, I think that one's now at the point where, yeah, hopefully we can get it landed this week. I also think Will's made a number of great improvements. Sorry, let's go over here. Besides that, actually, I think we've kind of cleared the queue of most of the items.
So Ian, you're supposed to talk about the rearranging of the sections.
Oh, sorry. Thank you. That's what I was supposed to be talking about.
Are you not ready?
No, I'm not ready. Sorry. I apologize.
Okay.
I meant to bring something up. I apologize. Bad.
So maybe
All right.
just for a second, on talking about that, would it make sense to talk about timing of that at all? And I made the comment that maybe I thought it would be better after IETF, but I really deeply defer this to the editors and the people doing it. It's not like a big issue. It just sort of, yeah.
Well,
I
we
mean-
will take another look at this next week between the editors and the chairs and see how. I mean, I'm not sure we succeeded in landing the extension stuff today, or at least putting on a clear path to that. So we'll have to take a look at what the effect is on outstanding PRs.
Martin, I think the read is pretty. I think if Will makes the updates based on the discussion, that we should be able to land extensions with like maybe a couple of issues that get filed against the landed PR.
Sure.
Does that seem reasonable? I mean, especially given there's an external dependency, we've made a lot of progress here. And again, we can always change our minds. Like
I was hoping to land joining Fetch and extensions, but by like Friday-ish, if we can.
Okay, if that is the plan, then okay, we'll talk about this again in the next week, the chairs and the editors, on what the exact timing is. But I guess the upshot for people out there that we're entering a zone here where we're going to sort of freeze the draft and then make a bunch of editorial changes so that there are no normative changes hidden in that massive diff. And so if you file a PR in the next couple of weeks, you are unless you land extremely quickly, you're likely to suffer some bit rot and cause yourself a lot of work. So having already given that warning, Colin, I understand your concerns, and I wouldn't say we've decided this for sure, but
yeah, look, I'm hoping to whether you guys decide to fine with it, but just balance it against the time we want to get a bunch of PRs is right before the meeting so we can discuss them at the meeting. And the time you want to merge all those IPRs and then muck with the document, huge things, is right after a meeting, right? Like it's like just as a very generic statement. Doesn't mean it's the right thing to do in this case.
That's an excellent point. Alan, you had a comment?
Well, I guess one of the things we're stuck here is because we have these two meetings very close together. So like after one meeting turns out to be before the next meeting.
No.
So part of me, unless people have like PRs they are about to imminently write to have us, maybe they are for Denver. I don't know. Are people who are bringing agenda items to Denver planning to write PRs to support those?
Yeah, can we just see a show of hands? Please raise your hand if you are like, if like you want to write a PR and you're being deterred by my pronouncements.
I'm not being, I plan to write a PR. I am perfectly
No,
fine.
that's cool. No, this is a great question,
100%
Colin.
bit rotted.
I'm glad you
Not,
raised it.
not an issue for, and by meeting, I actually meant after the next IETF meeting was the great time to totally refactor it. I mean, by meeting, I meant our upcoming IETF meeting. Bangkok, yeah, not Denver more. But look, I mean, decide what you want, but I mean, like, look, the way this working group works is you can't submit drafts. That's been proven to be completely useless. The only thing you can submit is PRs. So you're basically, what we just said is, please don't send any PRs before Bangkok. Right. I know that's not, I'm sure that's not what anyone intended when I phrase it that way, but that's roughly the conclusion I reached, right?
I don't want to push, I would like to push back on the notion that you're not allowed to submit drafts. Many drafts have been submitted. Those drafts have been discussed at meetings. Like it's a perfectly fine way to express some things. If what you're trying to express is a change in Mach T, it may work better as a PR.
Let's take that offline to a sort of more private conversation. Okay. We can sort it out. It's not relevant to here, but fair enough. Feedback taken.
All right. So a few takeaways here. I think if you are like, if you're mulling a PR and are deterred by my pronounces, please like contact the chairs offline and we might edit the plan a little bit. Secondly, you should see a new draft soon, like an actual new draft version, and that will be interrupt target for both Bangkok and Denver. And there was one other thing I wanted to say, but I don't remember what it was. I guess we'll just see you in Denver.
Are there any logistics for Denver? Do people who are coming in person need to email if they have not already?
Yes, we need to do that. Please send an email to mock chairs if you're planning to attend. I sent an email to the person who was putting this together, and he did not reply to me as to what actual information he needs. Just give me your name and affiliation. I'm sure that'll be good enough, and get that to me as soon as possible. If you want agenda time in Denver and have not requested it yet, please send an email like immediately after this meeting, because we'll probably discuss it in chat. The chair will probably discuss it in chat soon after this. Any other questions or comments for the good of the group? All right. Well then, in that case, I will see you all in Colorado, either virtually or otherwise. And have a good February.
Ciao.